What's the best way to clean the body and cap of a fountain pen as part of a pen maintenance routine? Great question. So you're talking about, I think it's pretty well assumed, at least by most individuals who know, something about fountain pens. You got to clean them out on a fairly regular basis. I say every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on your use, depending on the ink that you're using in your own environment. If you're in a very dry environment, your pen might dry out a little sooner, clean them more often. If you're using like an iron gall ink or a pigmented ink or something like that, clean it out more regularly, but somewhere in that range is pretty good. But what you're talking about is cleaning like the body of the pen, or maybe the cap, either outside, inside, whatever. And I have a couple of pens here I can pull out for you so I can show you what's going on there. But what happens as you're carrying it, it's not so much on the body. This is a piston filling pen, this is a Pelican, and it's piston filling, so there is nothing on the inside. As you flush it out, the whole body of the pen is filled with ink when you fill it up. But say I have something like the Custom 74. It's a demonstrator pen. It has a converter inside, but I might get ink somehow inside the body, or I might get something on the outside or whatever, and just what's the best way to maintain that, as well as the cap. Specifically, when you have a cap like a demonstrator like this, you can get to the point where there's ink that gets inside of here. And in fact, let me pull out a pen that I carry around on a regular basis to show you kind of what that looks like. I carry my pens around in my bag, and I throw the bag around, and ink can get in the cap. Here's my blue Custom 74. And if I can zoom in a little bit, I'm like in and out all kinds of day today. Okay, so if I pull this out, it's a demonstrator, so you can still see what's going on. There is some ink that will get up in here. You can see little spots of ink there. Can you see that? Sort of? Yeah, maybe? No? Yes? Okay, so there's ink that gets inside this cap just from, I'm carrying the pen, it's sloshing back and forth, it's sealed up. This pen specifically has a really well-sealed inner cap, so ink can actually evaporate as it's warm and condensate on the inner cap here. So as part of my pen cleaning routine, I need to clean out the cap. It's very simple. You do not need to overthink this process. There's 2 tools that are pretty indispensable for me in my pen cleaning process. One of them is, not going to shock you too much probably, but it's just, Q-tips. Doesn't have to be cotton swabs, doesn't have to be Q-tip brand, but cotton swabs. And then the other thing is paper towels. You can also use a pen flush, which I have somewhere around here, maybe. Ta-da! This is an old prototype version of pen flush, but it's the one that I've been using. So this is, pen flush. That's another tool that can be used, but is not critical in this specific instance. That's more to clean out the flow of the pen. Certain inks it can benefit from that, but I won't hit on that too hard. But when I'm cleaning my pens, what I do is I'll clean out the guts of the pen, so I'll clean out the inner parts and all that, and I'm left with the body and the cap. Sometimes it's fine, and I just kind of give it a visual inspection, but here, see, I've got like some ink on the threads here a little bit, I've got some ink on the inner cap. The easiest way to take care of this, honestly, is just to have your paper towel, your Q-tip, and to clean it at your sink, and just to run water over it. And then, if you got ink in the threads, you just kind of, scrub it with your Q-tip and kind of get in there. You could use a toothbrush too. An old toothbrush can work really well, especially inside threads and stuff. And then just flush that out. And then using a dry Q-tip to kind of just, get the water out. You could let it air dry, that's fine too. You could take a paper towel and you can kind of like, just take and roll it up a little bit and, just kind of cram it in here and then move it around, and that'll help to dry it out. And then you do the same thing with the cap. Now the cap usually is more of an issue because there's a lot more ink that can get in here, because that's where the nib is being exposed to it more than in the body. So what I like to do is I like to run it over water, and I just kind of fill it with water and dump it out. I have the sink running, fill it, dump it, fill it, dump it, fill it, dump it, until it's not really doing much anymore. But there's usually still a little ink that's kind of hanging out there somewhere, or it gets like into certain like parts of it. So I'll just take and fill it about halfway. I'll cover the cap with my finger, and then I'll just shake it back and forth like this, and then I'll dump it, and you can usually see there's some additionally tinted water that kind of comes out. And so I'll do that again, repeat, and just keep doing that until it's not doing that anymore. And then I take a Q-tip and I kind of swab while it's still wet. I'll swab on the inside and just kind of make sure that I'm not seeing any colored ink. And what happens is when you have concentrated ink, it shows up really dark. But when you have ink that gets diluted with water, like when you're washing it out, you can have the tiniest bit of ink in there, and it'll show up on a white swab like this. So you can actually get it quite clean by doing that, just by having that on your radar. So the water will help to flush it out, and then use that Q-tip to make sure that you kind of got it all, and then swirl it around in there. Now there's certain pens that have an insert like this. You can remove the insert sometimes. That can help, especially on a demonstrator like this, like the Custom 74, or a lot of TWSBIs have this insert, and that can be really helpful too. So what I like to do there is I like to grab a pencil and then a rubber band. Sorry, I didn't grab all these materials. I just kind of came up with this one on the fly. But, you know, to take a rubber band, just a regular rubber band, and a number 2 pencil should work just fine. Wrap it around the end of it, and then stick it in there, and that should give you some friction to grab it. And of course, there we go. So, and then you can grab that insert out of there, and then you can clean that out. And see, that's where some of my ink is in there. Is like around the edge of that. So you can see there I've got some diamine marine in there. And then to put the insert back in there, you literally just kind of like tap it back in. So most pens that have inserts like that can be removable, not all of them. So if it can happen, you know, like the Pilot Prera, for example, is more complicated than that. So you're gonna get frustrated because there's actually like a square wrench kind of thing, and it that fits in there, and then you have to actually unscrew the top finial to be able to remove that insert. So it gets a little bit complicated trying to do that. It can be done theoretically, but it's been difficult at times. So that's kind of going a step beyond, but honestly, just filling with water and shaking the dickens out of it can really go a long way. And then, you know, using the swab and the paper towel to kind of dry it out, let it air dry. So when I'm doing that, I'm usually, you know, disassembling my pen to some degree. Sometimes I'll pull the nib and feed out, sometimes I don't. It depends on what I'm trying to do, and if I know I'm going to ink it up with a similar color, I don't go through, you know, all the hoops to clean it out super thoroughly, but that's kind of my process, and that's really kind of it. You don't really need to do anything much more special than that to clean your pens on a regular basis. And I've explained all this, and it's taken several minutes to do so, but literally when you're going through this process and you've kind of got it down, I'm talking it's taken me probably no more than 20 to 30 seconds to do everything I just talked about here. It just kind of becomes part of the routine. Cool.